Well, there are fears that the consequences of lockdown could be dire for the nation's restaurants. But one group of restaurants, Boisdale, has launched a series of war bonds, vouchers to raise cash to keep the business going. Well, let's speak to the Managing Director, Ranald Macdonald, who's also a founder of City AM, the business free sheet newspaper. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I mean, both your businesses, Free Sheet business and the restaurant, very severely affected by the lockdown.
Indeed, although sadly I must correct you. I didn't found City AM, I founded Boisdale Life magazine.
Oh, well, carry on. Tell us about the war bonds.
Well, the war bonds are a spirited attempt to put a half smile on these tragic circumstances, remind us of previous times in which we have persevered and come through. And as the war bonds in the Second World War and First World War, they invited the public to support the country, in this case Boisdale, and to redeem great benefits after victory, in this case over coronavirus. So we're offering up to 100% dividends on war bonds bought now in peacetime to be enjoyed on our premises.
So basically people will give you money to keep afloat now, and they'll be able to cash that in for discounted meals later on.
That is it in a nutshell. Thank you.
And what sort of take-up are you having on this?
We've had several hundred, probably approaching 1,000 war bonds purchased, but the numbers are increasing every day. And we're about to issue our second collector's issue of war bonds this Saturday.
And is it enough to keep you afloat when you haven't got any customers?
It all helps. Day by day, we navigate our way through the storms, and every little initiative is pushing us in the right direction.
And what is the situation with your staff at your restaurants? Are they being furloughed? Are you able to pay them, or have you had to actually let some people go?
Well, the situation in summary is that the virus war has two implications. One is health and one is economy. The first stage of the government support, the furloughing, has allowed businesses like ours the ability to breathe. The second stage is the government-backed loan, which will give us the sustenance to continue to survive and to regroup and reopen. The government loans, though, are very hard to come by, and the uptake is very disappointing. And the distribution of government loans compared to any other leading nation in the world is incredibly low. We're about 300 times lower distribution of government-backed loans compared to America, France, Germany, Sweden, Switzerland, you name it. So at the moment, in my sort of business category, for small to medium size, employing between 1 and 250 people, there are 1.4 million businesses out there, all suffering incredibly, who will not survive, most of them without government support. And of those 1.4 million businesses, only 12,000 government-backed loans have been approved. Those 1.4 million businesses employ 11.8 million people and contribute 1.18 trillion to the UK economy, which is over a third of our national GDP. So this is very, very important.
Now, why is it proving difficult to get these loans? Because, I mean, clearly the government designed them to be accessible.
Well, the government designed them with 330 billion in mind to be distributed. I think so far, up until earlier this week, 1.1 billion have been distributed. The Americans have put out 350 billion, the Germans 1.1 trillion, the French 350 billion. The difficulty is that in other countries, a percentage of turnover or multiple of employee cost was a loan that you could be granted. Here in Britain, for hybrid reasons, businesses are having to comply with normal commercial loan terms, which makes it incredibly difficult for businesses to comply and be approved.
I mean, one of the things is that I think the government is underwriting 80% rather than 100% of loans. You presumably would want them to underwrite the whole lot.
Well, given that we'll repay 100% is not that relevant, but obviously it would be very helpful. The key thing is that the loans aren't getting out there. And only a tiny proportion of businesses who all have paid all their taxes to date. So I don't think we should have corporate eugenics in deciding who should survive and who shouldn't survive. But there are a lot of competent, long-serving businesses that will require cash because this was an unforeseen circumstance. And during war, the government does traditionally support business. The key issue is the lending criteria to the businesses so that they can actually borrow. Because I would imagine that 80% plus of businesses would be in a position to repay the loan over a long period, but they need a 5-year term. But the key thing also, if you think about the economics of the situation, is that there is no cash call on the government in the short to medium term. So this doesn't actually cost the government anything, whereas a furlough is very expensive. So guaranteeing loans and using the bank reserves is a great way to keep the economy going. And every other country, every other leading nation on the planet has done that, but Britain has not.
Is the problem actually, are the villains of the peace the banks rather than the government in this, that the banks are being difficult?
It's difficult to say. The banks say it's all down to the British Business Bank lending criteria, but I've looked at a number of high street banks, and their lending criteria differs, which means that the banks are interpreting what they've been told, but I've not seen what is actually written in the British business bank's lending criteria. But so it is probably a hybrid between the two. But you can't have your cake and eat it. You either want the economy to go forward. Private businesses, of which there are 5.8 million in this country, employ 27 million people, and it's that private sector that pays all the tax, because the public sector does pay tax, but it pays tax on tax. Private sector is what drives this economy forward and what pays for the NHS, education and everything else. Without the private business sector, this country would completely and utterly collapse.
Well, Ranald Macdonald of Boisdale, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
A pleasure. Thank you very much.
Time for a